The pre-trip inspection of the vehicle you'll be driving is the most important part of starting out your job as a professional truck driver. A proper pre-trip inspection saves you time and your company money. If you do a pre-trip inspection each time you get ready for your run, you can find and correct any problem with the unit before you get out on the road. This helps to ensure your vehicle will arrive at your destination and get you safely back home, saving you hours of breakdown time on the road waiting for someone to fix the defects that you did not see. A good pre-trip inspection will take 15 to 30 minutes and consist of checking under the tractor, checking under the hood, doing a walk-around inspection, checking the gauges, controls, and emergency equipment in the cab, checking all your lights, and doing a brake check. Tankers and other types of specialty trailers will have different inspection requirements. For the purpose of this video, we'll be inspecting a van. Checking under the tractor. First, park the unit on level ground. Use parking brakes and/or wheel chocks. As you approach the vehicle, look under the unit for any signs of leaking fluid, loose or frayed wiring or hoses, and check your glass, including mirrors and lights. Checking under the hood. Tilt the hood up and check all fluid levels: engine oil, coolant level, power steering fluid, and windshield washer fluid. Make sure that there are no fluid leaks anywhere on the engine itself. Check all belts for tightness. 1/2 inch of play is acceptable. Check all of the steering gear parts, including steering arms, pitman arm, drag link, tie rod, spindle, steering gear box, ring knuckles, and shaft. Check the frame, springs, spring hangers, spring shackles, torque rods, and U-bolts. Check the shock absorbers. Make sure they are not leaking and firmly attached with no missing, broken, rusty, or bent bolts. Check all the air lines for leaks, cracks, or bulges. Check all fluid hoses for leaks, cracks, splices, bulges, crimping, or rubbing. Check the front bearings for oil leakage. The walk-around inspection, starting with the driver's side of the cab. Check that all the glass is clean and in good shape. Make sure the mirrors are securely attached. Make sure the driver's door is firmly attached. Check your tractor's fuel tax stickers and annual inspection label to make sure they're up to date. Check each of the wheels on both the tractor and the trailer in this order, starting with the driver's side steering axle and tire. Make sure all the lug nuts are in place and tight with no rust showing. Rust around a lug nut usually means it's loose. Check each rim for any signs of cracks or welds. Cracked or welded rims are not legal on the highway. Check for any signs of oil leaking from any of the wheel bearings. Inspect all of the tires on both the tractor and the trailer in the following manner as you do your walk-around. Check all tires for any signs of cracks, bulges, weather checks, uneven wear, or tread separation. There can be no mixing of radial and biased tires. Each dual tire must be the same height. Check all duals to make sure there's nothing wedged between the wheels and that the duals are not touching. Check each valve stem for any signs of fraying, weather checking, or rubbing against the rims. Make sure each valve stem has a cap. On the steering axle, the tires must have a minimum of 4/32 of an inch of tread depth. If you put a penny in the tire tread, 4/32 is where Lincoln's hair touches his forehead. All other tires besides the steering axle tires must have a minimum of 2/32 of an inch of tread depth. 2/32 would be the top of Lincoln's head. Check your fuel tanks to make sure they are secure and not leaking. Make sure the crossover line is free. Make sure the catwalk is secure. If the battery is located here, make sure the battery box cover is secure and check the battery fluid level if possible. Check the back of the cab for any signs of damage. Make sure the air and electric lines are hooked up properly and not kinked or rubbing against something that could break them. Check that the splash guards or mud flaps are in place and secure. Check the front of the trailer for any signs of damage. And make sure your trailer registration and inspection stickers are up to date. Check the frame of the tractor for any signs of welds, cracks, or missing, rusty, or bent bolts. Check the fifth wheel. Make sure there's no light showing between the fifth wheel and the upper fifth wheel plate, sometimes called the platform. See that all the bolts and nuts that fasten the fifth wheel to the frame are not missing, broken, rusty, or bent. If you have a sliding fifth wheel, make sure the pins are in the slots and locked in place to prevent you from losing the trailer. Get under the trailer behind the fifth wheel and shine a flashlight up into the V of the fifth wheel to make sure that the silver locking arm is secure around the shank of the kingpin. Get out from underneath and check the kingpin release lever indicator if so equipped to be sure the kingpin is latched properly. Inspect your drive shaft and universal joints. The shaft or shafts must be straight and the U-joints must be tight. Make sure the torque arm is in place and bolted down to keep your axles secure. Inspect the suspension. Check both the tractor and the trailer to see that all of the springs, shackles, spring hangers, and U-bolts are in place with no missing, broken, rusty, or bent bolts. Legally, no more than 1/4 of the leaves in any multi-leaf spring may be broken or missing, but any defect could be dangerous. If you have airbag suspension, make sure the airbags are even, with good air connections and not weather checked, leaking, or rubbing against the frame. Check all the brake drums in this way. Look for any signs of oil leaks. The brake drum should not have any cracks over halfway across. The brake shoes must have at least 1/4 inch of brake pad. Check the brake drums for any signs of rust. If the brake drums are not shiny, they're not working properly. Pull on the slack adjusters. On all brakes, they should have no more than 1 inch of play. Automatic slack adjusters have slightly more pull than manuals. Check the underside of the trailer to make sure that the floor doesn't have any damage and that all of the cross members are in place and are not loose, bowed, bent, or rusted through. The rivets that hold the cross members should also be checked. There cannot be more than 2 rivets in a row missing on any of the cross members. Look under the trailer to make sure all the air and electric lines are secure. Make sure there are no air leaks by the tanks or brakes. Listen for hissing air or look at the air lines. If there is oil or moisture on the outside of the air lines or their fittings, there's a good chance you're leaking air. Look at the back of the outside of the trailer. Make sure both doors are properly closed and latched and that the handles and hinges are in good shape and secure with no missing, broken, rusty, or bent bolts. Check for any damage to the back of the trailer, making sure there's no rust out on the trailer corner posts. Look at the license plate of the trailer and make sure it's up to date. Check the mud flaps. Make sure they don't rub against the tires and that they are properly braced so that they don't swing out uselessly. Now continue your walk-around inspection, this time on the passenger's side using the same method we've just discussed. Check the landing gear to make sure it's fully up with the crank handle in the bracket. When you reach the tractor, be sure to check the exhaust stack to see that it is braced firmly with no signs of exhaust leaks. You check how well the exhaust stack is braced by grabbing and shaking it. You should not be able to move it. But be careful, it could be very hot. Carbon deposits on the outside of the stack are a sign of exhaust leak, especially around the flex tube. Do an in-cab check. Get in the cab and check these items: the clutch, brake, and accelerator pedals. Make sure they're clear of loose debris. Make sure the pedals move freely and that there are no unusual noises when you push on them. And check the seat belts. Put the key in the ignition. Before you start the engine, make sure the wheels are chocked, the parking brakes are on, or both. Make sure that the gear shift is mounted securely and meshes properly. Put the gear shift into neutral, or park if it has an automatic transmission. Start the engine and listen for unusual sounds. Be sure you know your particular engine settings. Then check your gauges and make sure they register at their correct levels at startup and also as you drive. Check your oil pressure gauge. The needle should come up to normal in just a few seconds. Check the ammeter or voltmeter, which indicates that your alternator is working and your battery is getting charged. That needle should also quickly come up to normal at startup. Check both air pressure dials to make sure there is enough air in the tanks. Check coolant temperature. This needle takes 5 minutes or more to come up to normal temperature. Check the engine oil temperature gauge if so equipped. After the engine warms up, the engine oil temperature should register within the normal range. If it goes above the normal range, you have an engine problem. Check the pyrometer if so equipped. This gauge measures the heat of the exhaust and the engine head. This is very important hauling on long, steep grades. Check the tachometer, speedometer, and the temperature gauges for both rear ends. Make sure the windshield wipers are working properly. Check the heater, the defroster, and the air conditioners to make sure they're working properly. Make sure the steering wheel is mounted securely and has less than 10 degrees free play. On a 20-inch steering wheel, this would be about 2 inches of play. Now, push in the red and yellow brake buttons to release the brakes. Turn off your engine, then turn the key back on without starting the engine so your warning lights will function. And start your brake pump down. Pump the brakes to use up air pressure. At approximately 60 psi, your low air pressure warnings should come on. Keep pumping, and between 20 to 40 psi, the red and yellow brake buttons will pop out. This means your spring brakes have automatically come on and that your air brake system is working properly. While you're waiting for your air pressure to build up, pull out your vehicle registration, insurance, and other paperwork to make sure they're up to date. Start the engine again and check all your dash lights, including the warning lights. If you have an electrical system with fuses, you must have spare fuses for every type of fuse that you use. If you have a circuit breaker system, check it to make sure it's working properly. If your truck is satellite equipped or has a GPS system, check the system to make sure it is operating correctly. Make sure the parking brake is on. Then exit the cab and check the outside lights, front to back, including the trailer lights, clearance lights, brake lights, turn signals, and high-low beams. As you check your lights, clean the lenses and make sure they're in good shape. Make sure your fire extinguisher is charged and latched down so it won't roll around in your cab. Check to make sure you have at least 3 warning devices in case of a breakdown. Check any other special items that your company requires. And before you move the vehicle, make sure to remove the wheel chocks. That's how a proper pre-trip inspection is done. Now you're ready to leave the yard and proceed down the road knowing your truck is safe and ready to operate. If you follow this procedure every time before you start out on the road, you'll save yourself time and your company money. Thanks for watching.